Okay, so I suggest that we slowly start. Can you hear me? Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us in these unusual circumstances. I think most of you are joining us from your living room. So am I, actually, as you can see. Welcome to our think tank talk, which is called Are Fintech the Silver Bullet to Achieve the SDGs? And that's the question we will try to answer today. For those of you who are joining us for the first time in the Think Tank Talk series, so the Think Tank Talk series are an event series that aim at introducing the new ideas or work that has been done on global challenges by think tanks. And we're very happy to welcome several think tanks today. Nadia will say more to the people that are going to speak. But the Think Tank Talk series also aims at foster a discussion between the participants. So it's a bit easier when we are in one room, but we will try our best today. So to have a bit of that feeling of being in the same room, one thing that you can do is you can share your contacts in the comments. If you want to share your contacts and get in contact with other participants. So that's one way of sharing your contacts. The other thing that you can do is also sending us an email, and we can put the contacts for those who want to share theirs in a follow-up email, so that participants can get in contact with each other. So the Think Tank Hub, which is the organization that is doing the Think Tank Talk series, and the Sustainable Fintech project. Those are two projects that are done by foraus, the think tank on foreign policy that we all work for. If you want to know more about these initiatives, I'm not going to explain too long, but we will send the links in the comments right now. So you can see, if you're interested in the projects, you may go there and know more about these initiatives. So without further ado, one important thing, the talk is recorded, and I would encourage you to switch on your screen so you can see each other. It's a bit more interactive, but just so you know, it's streamed on Facebook, and also it will be available on our website. So those who don't want to be recognized, just keep the camera off. But now, without further ado, I want to introduce you to Nadia Franca. She is our Senior Sustainable Finance Fellow, and she will guide us through this discussion today.
Thank you very much, Maria, for the introduction. I'm really glad to be here today, collaborating with the Think Tank Hub on this discussion about sustainable finance, sustainable digital finance, more specifically, topics which are super close to my work and also to my heart. And I think to make an introduction to our panel today, let me explain why we decided to organize this event, and how is our goal, what are our goals today. So as many of you know, we are walking towards our deadline to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 agenda. And one of the challenges we face now is the financing aspects of the SDGs. So how to finance the SDGs, how to finance the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And the finance sector, and the sustainable finance sector more specifically, is exploring ways, is creating momentum, so to allocate mainstream capital to sustainable projects, but also to seek more sustainable ways of doing finance. Then our guiding question for our discussion today is, what about fintechs? What about digital finance? Are fintechs key to achieve sustainability? Are fintechs key to achieve sustainability in finance? And we are glad here to have 4 experts on the topic discussing about sustainable fintechs today. Moreover, discussing different country-level perspectives on the topic. So we are happy to have Nelly Ramirez, Vice President and Head of Advanced Digital Services at Fundaciòn Capital, Colombia. Carlos Ragazzo, Chairman of the Advisory Board, Instituto ProPague from Brazil. Abid Suleri, Executive Director of the Sustainable Development Policy Institute in Pakistan. And also Anna Stünzi, President of foraus, Swiss Forum of Foreign Policy, and founder of the Sustainable Fintech project at foraus, and she will speak about Swiss perspectives and also European perspectives. So about the run of show, first we start with a short presentation from each of our speakers, and then we move to the open discussion. So the attendees of the session, you are more than welcome to ask your questions. So please use the chat box to ask questions. So, and name the speaker you are addressing your question to. Then after the presentations, we open the floor for discussions. Okay. Then I think we can start. So Nelly, welcome. Thank you for being here, and we are happy to hear from you about experiences of Fundaciòn Capital and Colombia as well.
Thank you, Nadir, and thank you everyone joining us today and for the Think Tank series to get the opportunity to discuss about these issues. In Fundaciòn Capital, as many of you don't know, we work to promote economic citizenship at scale and globally, and we've done so with technology for the past 12 years. We have developed several digital solutions aimed to promote economic citizenship that we understand as helping people living in vulnerable conditions, mainly people living in poverty, to obtain the information, the access, and the assets they need in order for them to achieve economic citizenship. For this series that we're going to speak about the SDGs, all of our digital solutions target 4 SDGs, 4, 5, 8, and 10. Today, I will speak briefly of 2 of them, and mainly one of them, which is called LISTA, which is an acronym for Achieving Inclusion Through Technology and Savings, which is a scalable digital solution that we've already implemented in 12 countries with over 500,000 people. It targets this SDG 10, mainly SDG 10.2. And aside from that, I also wanted to mention that I don't know if I'm sure many here in the room know about the Catalyst 2030 movement. It's a global movement of social entrepreneurs and social innovators from all sectors who are working together or creating collaborations and networking spaces in order to create innovative approaches to attain the SDGs by 2030. And Fundaciòn Capital is one of the founding members of this movement as well. So the 2 SDGs that I would like to share with the audience today, the first one, LISTA. LISTA is a scalable digital solution that it has proven to build financial capabilities of those living in poverty and vulnerability. It has already been implemented in 12 countries with over 550,000 people. One of the main learnings and the reason why one of the targeting of the triggering questions for this event was what does it need for sustainable finances, for sustainable digital finances to happen, and what is the role for think tanks and what kind of cooperation can take place. In our opinion and our learnings with this application in particular, we know that implementation is key. So the application is an edutainment app, is very user-friendly. It has proven to reduce people's, increase people's financial capabilities, financial management capabilities that would lead and has led in some cases to financial inclusion. However, the implementation of the app is the methodology that we use on the field to implement the app has been as important as the technological part of the application. So this is where we see, for example, a very important role for think tankers or for researchers and people working on the ground or people working in research. how do we, in the midst of the pandemic, we created a virtual assistant in order to overcome some of the physical limitations of actually getting to people and bringing our digital solutions to them. But I think that in the current context, there is a very, very huge research gap right now. And how do we bring some of these things? How do we bridge the digital gap? How do we bridge the knowledge gap in an increasingly virtual world, but that is also increasingly moving towards exclusion? So this is something that we're currently working on. We're creating the virtual avenues, so to speak, of how to bring these applications. So this is number one on what some of the challenges that we see for digital solutions for being sustainable, and also and mainly for bringing them to people living in vulnerable conditions. The other, Lista's impact, I just wanted to mention that has been measured with RCT impact evaluations, and it has proven that it has in Honduras, in Mexico, in Colombia, and it has proven that it has positive impact in users' financial capabilities, despite of the geographical differences. This is also very important because some of the other triggering questions was what cooperations between countries there could be. I think this is a huge role for social entrepreneurs, for NGOs, for researchers who are working here. There is no such thing as a different world, or such a different world now. We can definitely, with data, we can identify patterns, we can identify similarities, and then we can work together to create innovative approaches to bring some of these, to bring digital solutions to people living in vulnerable conditions, and mainly those that foster their economic inclusion, their financial inclusion, and their productivity. The second training application that we have is for banking agents. It's DEMO. It's to create as a training applications to use on tablets, on mobile phones with Android. It works. Both Lista and DEMO work online and offline, and is a user-friendly interface allowing follow-up on the effectiveness of the training. It is designed for people to get on board on the banking system. As you all know, not being part of the banking system truly excludes people from achieving many of the benefits of the financial system itself and of the economy in general. It has gone through very successful trial programs in Colombia, and it targets its SDG 10.2 and 10.5. The same as Lista, DEMO has a very interesting implementation strategy on the ground, which with rotating tablets amongst people, and mainly in the case of Lista, it targets its semi-urban population, and Lista targets its people living in rural or urban, but living in poverty. And to end, I think that most of the applications, the digital solutions designed for sustainable finances, there is two main things, and this is something that we have very much in mind. They need to be design data driven to understand what people really need when they need it, and in that way, we can identify what it is that we need to do together, collaboratively with other organizations, with other countries, in other cities, what could be scalable and what can't. And second, really think thoroughly on implementation, because there's a lot of thought given to the digital solution per se, or how the application is done, or the functionalities, the components, the contents, but there's little thought or little discussion on how it's going to be implemented. How are we going to bring this to people in order for it to add value to them, and how do we prove that it adds value to them? So these are like basic initial ideas that I wanted to share of some of the things that we've done and some of the discussions that we have in the house.
Thank you very much, Nelly. And now I think we can turn to Carlos.
Hi, Nadir. Thank you very much. And also a shout out to the rest of the panel. I'm very happy to be here. Just a quick introduction on Instituto ProPague. We are an institute which was mainly created to foster regulatory change, innovation, and transparency. So it's been odd to see what's happening in the last year because of the pandemic. But there were a lot of things that happened in Brazil that I truly believe that were interesting for people to understand. So what we had an app which was called Caixa Tem, basically handing out, distributing the money which was needed for the people that were informal, that do not have bank accounts. So basically this whole process, and in Brazil, this is a quite range of people, this is a huge amount of people. The bank's digitalization was accelerated by the pandemic, as this specific state-owned bank, which is called Caixa in Brazil, was responsible for granting most of the resources. And the numbers are really, really great. If you look at it, it's pretty much like 64 million people were actually introduced into the digital environment because of the emergency aids which were granted in Brazil. The numbers are impressive because that actually result in the lifting of almost, actually a little bit more than 13 million people out of poverty. This is temporarily because the financial aid was just meant to be, during the period of the pandemic, which has extended. So right now there has been, a few discussions on whether to extend it or not. But at least at the time that it was working, it reached, over 60 million people and actually managed to digitalize 64 million people into this app. At the same time, in Brazil, there is an agenda which is called the Central Bank # Agenda, which is, to a certain extent contributes directly to the SDGs, because it's built on education and growth, innovation, infrastructure, climate action. And this whole idea was to set, a few new regulatory regimes in order to bring fintech into more sustainable goals. We have an open banking regulatory agenda going on in Brazil. We just introduced a fast payment system, which is called PIX. And this whole PIX process was pretty much focused on developing a better way of making payments. So you'd have availability of funds in real time and available 24 hours a day, all days of the week throughout the year. But we'd also think that it might be a way to include more people. Because we're seeing overseas processes in which the payment systems were pretty much more inclusive than bank accounts. As I mentioned before, over 60 million people in Brazil do not have bank accounts. So we would have to develop a new way of people getting access to financial services. And we truly believe the fast payments and the PIX system might be an issue, might be a way to do so. There are some, results for this. So these advantages, these opportunities. So if it's, as I mentioned before, 64 million people were registered, and that led to a discussion into building a digital bank for Caixa. But there are more projects, up ahead. If you look, for instance, there's a project involving what we call the PIX withdrawal. So today we make cash withdrawals from ATMs, and we are envisioning that in 2021, this year, that'll probably be possible to develop a PIX withdrawal. So you can have, we'll allow the user to have some physical money without needing an ATM. That also will allow people to withdraw money without having a bank account, receiving the financial aid and withdrawing in whatever place they want to. So this is a sort of a type of cash withdrawal that will be available in physical stores of retail chains. And this is something that we see that might be possible for happening in the near time. There are some challenges to it that we are trying to tackle now, regulatory-wise. The first one relates to cybersecurity, because everyone is worried about the potential victims and scams that might be applying in the digital environment. So this is an issue. The other issue that we are worried about, it's related to data protection. Some of the regulatory movements, which can be very important in Brazil, especially related to bringing credit to more accessible ways to specific types of people and more marginalized groups, they actually depend on the development of the open banking regulatory regime. And we have actually next week, it's going to be the first phase, the beginning of the first phase, where people are going to disclose the services and products that financial institutions actually present. So what we have now, the main challenges are, these ones are the regulatory ones, but we also have non-regulatory ones, which are related to building financial capacity in Brazil. So what we have, and this is very important to develop open banking strategies, we do have a major issue related to building financial capacity, because Brazil scored below the average, not only in the G20, but also in Latin American countries, as to making well-informed financial decisions. So, which is basically when people seek information about important characteristics of a product when making a choice. So in order for these regulatory regimes to work, open banking specifically, which in our view will create more products, more accessible products and more diverse products, and perhaps cheaper access to credit, you would need to bridge this gap, since not only it's the problem with that, related to seeking information, but also 50% of the Brazilians do not reach the minimum financial attitude scores, which is an indicator that measures short-term preferences that can hinder the development of improvements in financial resilience and welfare. So basically what we see is that we've had some development and fintech-wise, and also in state-owned companies making it digital for a lot of people to be included in Brazil in the digital and financial environment. We are dealing and we're tackling with the challenges we are related to financial capabilities. And to my point, where we see that the think tanks have a role in order to build this and to process this better, we have to monitor what's happening overseas and try to break down this information into the Brazilian regulators, into the Brazilian society. Major regulatory movements will only work if there are help from the government and also pressure from society. We have to understand that the consumers will have to understand the benefits of sharing their data in order to receive better access to credit services, better access to financial services. And that entails a lot of convincing, that entails a lot of information. And also the same problems that we're dealing here now, they're also happening all over the world. Open banking is a process which is happening all over the world. So once we bridge the gap and understand the problems that are happening overseas, we can break it down and try and explain that both to the consumers and to the regulatory agencies in Brazil. This is just a general overview, and I think a lot has happened during the pandemic. We can further discuss this.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for this great overview about the Brazilian context. Now we would like to welcome Dr. Abid Suleri from the SDPI. Thank you for being here, and we are looking forward to hear about Pakistan experience.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending wherever you are. Can I share my screen? I have just a couple of slides that I would like to run through. Yes. So we are talking of fintech being silver bullet or not, and I would just like to present the case study of Pakistan. Of course, one of the things that is happening in Pakistan is introduction of mobile money and e-wallets. We were just hearing from Brazil, quite a few people, large segment of population out of formal banking channels, and same is in case of Pakistan. Almost 100 million people, they were exclusive and out of this formal banking channel. And this mobile money wallets, they have actually proved extremely effective tool for financial inclusion. In Pakistan, we are using blockchain technology, mobile money technology, and especially these two, they proved very helpful in COVID response. And in COVID response, government of Pakistan, they provided assistance to 15 million households through using this blockchain technology and mobile money technology. So 1.5 million households, those were actually being provided one-time financial assistance within first few weeks of COVID when it started. Similarly, now digital applications and platforms, they're being used. And again, this COVID the silver lining of COVID is that it has actually enhanced our adaptation level to use technology. So online businesses, online health consultation, online banking, online education, so each and everything, while it is going online, it is also promoting this financial inclusion. And the fourth factor that is helping it is, besides fintech, the use of technology in regulatory bodies and use of technology for social interaction and social media, government technology. So these are also complementing. Now, these are the four pillars that right now Government of Pakistan and State Bank of Pakistan, they're trying to use to promote digital fintech, digital ID, knowing your customer. That was never the case in Pakistan. It is quite a new one now. Open electronic payment system, similarly account opening initiative and design of digital financial market. So all four of them, they are proving to be quite successful. And if you look at McKinsey's recent report, McKinsey has forecasted that by 2025, it would this digital fintech that would contribute around $36 billion per year to countries' GDP. And as I said, that 100 million adults, they still lack access to regulated and formal financial services. So that is a weakness as well as a major opportunity for adopting this fintech. Now, if we quickly look at this SWOT analysis, the adoption of a smartphone, that has increased. So in 2016, while we only had 16.6% users, they were using smartphone. In 4 years' time, 51% users, they are using a smartphone. And it is in a country where we have a mobile tele density of 71.4%. So Pakistan is 222 million people, and out of them, 71.4%, they are connected to through telephone. And similarly, almost 48 million, they are using 3G and 4G, the broadband. So 155 million, they are biometrically verified. So now government, if they have to reach somewhere through biometric scanning, they know 145 million people who are smartphone or other cellular phone users. And of course, reaching to them is much easy. The problem that one is facing, that nearly 38% of mobile money agents, they require biometric machines, and they're still not active. And that can be one of the problem. And second problem that one is facing is intra-cellular this operability. So right now, different mobile users, they can only use the services provided by their cellular provider. They can't switch to companies for getting benefit of these mobile fintech services. Now, when one looks at regulatory barriers and non-regulatory barriers, I think this integration of sustainability consideration into macroeconomic policies and regulation, that is one of the non-regulatory barriers. So things are still working in silos. So of course, we are talking of fintech, we are talking of financial inclusion and adaptation of fourth industrial revolution technology, but not with the perspective of SDGs. Most of it is either knee-jerk reaction or it is to cope with COVID. So this whole concept of somehow blending sustainability concept, sustainable development goals concept into SDGs, into fintech, that is providing to be one of the policy barriers. But this is something which again is an opportunity for think tanks like Sustainable Development Policy Institute, because now more and more emphasis is being given on data-based and evidence-based decision making. And that's where think tanks like STPI, we can see playing our role. We are not only data collector, but also data interpreter and data disseminator. So we are providing our services to the government bodies, to the state bank and to various other ministries to whom we can provide data. And this is again one of the new sectors where researchers, they are focused and they are trying to align their research with the SDG. And I'll sum it up that fintech may not be a magic bullet per se, but fintech is definitely a very strong catalyst, and it can improve the progress towards SDG agenda multifold through multiple channels directly and indirectly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abid Sillery. Now I think we can turn on to Anna. Anna Stünzi from foraus.
Yes, very welcome. I will share my screen as well. Oh, yeah, perfect. Okay. Well, so very welcome also from my side. I'm very happy that this think tank talk can actually take place now. And I was asked to give a bit or a few more general comments. And I decided to use a slide that we actually created 4 years ago. And I can pretty much use it exactly the same way as we did back then when we founded the Sustainable Fintech project, a project within our think tank. So the pressure for policymakers and of course the pressure within the economy and the society to achieve the sustainable development goals is growing, and we have less and less time. And then this idea of having digital transformation, not just in the banking and the finance sector, but basically all over our economic systems. There is a bit this dream of creating the unicorns. For those who are aware of kind of the business language, a unicorn is considered to be a startup with a $1 billion value that could be sold. And if we think of the money we need to achieve the SDGs, I think their estimation about 3 trillion per year. You can calculate yourself how many unicorns we would need. But it also shows a bit the very different perspectives, but also wishes that are linked to this, link between sustainability, digitization and finance. So achieving the SDGs is something very else than having a digital transformation, and it's also something very different to making money with founding a startup. And so, yes, so I decided to just give a few remarks or observations, kind of adding up on the speakers before, where we've also heard some very concrete applications already, and of course also challenges from your perspective. I think the momentum at the moment is enormous. The financial players, they need a new story, and they're kind of the policymakers are pushing more and more towards including this idea of sustainability in the financial sector. We also have consumers that are engaging more and more. And then some very practical reasons, we just see that some kind of targets cannot be solved manually. All of you who have tried to understand how, I don't know, carbon footprints are measured know that this is not being done in, by hand. But of course, this also yields some very big challenges. The same time as we want to keep this momentum high, we also have to walk the talk. And digitization is not always easy, not just from a technological perspective, but also from a cultural perspective, for example, in companies. And then there's also this question whether we're creating a new industry or whether it's a growing industry, and where it thereby also destroys probably old players and big players in existing fields. Then we know that digitization is everywhere. So we kind of have some war for talents when it comes who actually implements then these solutions, as we've heard before, who programs it, who codes it, and who implements it. And finally, what I think is always interesting is to see that although we see a vibrant and growing field of events and workshops and topics kind of addressing around this sustainability and digitization in finance, we still have to find a common language. Sometimes, and just a very small example, when you talk of long-term in technology, this is very different than what you talk on long-term in sustainability. A few risks that I could also add, just from my perception of the moment when we talk about sustainable finance, a lot of people only mean climate finance. This is not the same like green, and it's not the same like sustainable. And there is a bit of risk that sometimes we do some cherry picking. We take our most favorite SDG or the one that we can fulfill the best, but it's not always, this sometimes goes in the wrong direction when you have a more overarching picture on the SDGs. And the final point that I want to make before I think, and I'm very much looking forward to discussion, is that of course sustainable fintechs and the financial industry cannot achieve the SDGs alone. they're a very, very important lever, but sometimes we tend to forget a bit that it's not just the financial industry, but all the policies around that, for example, make the inclusion of risks or the inclusion of costs possible and necessary for the financial sector. And with that, I think I want to give back to Nadir to open up the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your presentation. And yes, now I think we can move to the discussion session. And if you allow me, I'd like to open the floor with a question. So in your presentations, you covered these main aspects where we can see the potentials of technology and finance to address the SDGs as diverse as sharing economy and financial inclusion. Also the challenges, the regulatory and non-regulatory challenges. But yeah, could you please develop a bit more? Where do you see in terms of integrating sustainability into financial regulation? Where is the main bottleneck in your ecosystem, in the ecosystem you are, but also in the global ecosystem of sustainable digital finance? Where do you think is the main bottleneck to integrate sustainability into financial regulation? Who would like to address?
Maybe I can take it early. I think the bottleneck for me is integration. Integration, both domestic integration as well as the global integration. For example, for a country like Pakistan, where we have now this millions of customers who are using smartphones, we are still not integrated with the international payment gateway like Amazon or like others. So Pakistan was only able to introduce its first digital payment gateway last week. So I think this integration between countries and integration within country, that is right now the bottleneck.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vidi. I think Nelly would like to contribute to this question.
Yes, thank you, Nadir. I think it's too, following up on Anna's excellent presentation, I think that there's two bottlenecks on behalf of the regulators, three bottlenecks actually. One is the information and the talent gap. Being that, as Anna mentioned, like we all think we're talking about the same thing, but like some of these concepts are very new, mainly in developing countries. So it's very difficult to make sure that we are talking about the same thing and that we are aiming for the same thing. So this is a synchronization problem, I think, on the first hand. Then it's a talent a talent gap on behalf of regulators. Many of the people who are interested in these topics, who are working towards these topics, they are not necessarily working on the government because of the low trust levels of the government. People are not very excited of being part of the government anymore, and even more so young talent. And then also implementation costs. There are right now sustainable solutions are very expensive to bring everywhere, meaning on behalf of the government. So this is one of the main challenges also for bringing our digital solutions for the people living in vulnerable conditions. It is very expensive to get there because there isn't the necessary infrastructure. So making sure this doesn't revolve around the same people and that it is actually for everyone is also very costly and very demanding.
Nice. Thank you, Nelly. Anna would also add a point on it.
Yeah, thank you. I think just to add on what's been said before, what I totally agree on is the availability of data. And it's not always the case, but what I just read for biodiversity recently, a survey showed that most investors say, well, actually, if we have data on like how to price in, and then we might also want to start a discussion whether you want to price, for example, or monetize biodiversity. But in general, having data available allows to start on an existing stock of information where everybody agrees on, and based on that, you can also define pathways on how you want to get to another target. And then in addition to that, what I think is very important, goes a bit away from your question, but it's this that we don't promise too much, or if we promise a lot, that we also assess it afterwards and see whether it's actually being held what we say. So we also need data to control whether the impact investing, for example, is taking place or not, so that we don't lose the trust of the customers who are willing to change within the system, but then we also have to make sure that we walk this talk really.
In fact, thank you. Please, Carlos.
Yes, I think to the point that Anna made, we also have a data access problem because most of the information is within the major banks in Brazil. So it's difficult for the other financial agents and financial institutions to develop new products and more, tailored to specific needs. So everything is a bit more expensive than it should be. And the other problem, which I think is even worse, is the building capacity. Because once we made these people digital and we had access to a digital environment, there was a problem into making them staying in that environment and using and getting accustomed to that. As I mentioned before, we have over 60 million people which are outside of the financial formal system. So I think that the major challenge in Brazil is to actually include those people into the financial system and then to make it sustainable. We have an inclusion issue, which is, I think, one of the most problematic issues that we have in Brazil.
Yes, in fact, so the inclusion issues would be a first step to be solved before the regulatory, in fact. Then you also mentioned it during your presentations about some bilateral initiatives. So could you develop a bit more on how the ecosystem you are part of perceive this cooperation between countries regarding sustainable digital finance? What have you learned, or which examples you have? How have your ecosystem also helped other ecosystems in develop sustainable digital finance, and how you see these bilateral comparisons in the context of sustainable digital finance? Who would like to address? Maybe Nelly, you mentioned some learnings between Colombia, Honduras.
Yes, no, my point was our digital solution lista that I mentioned, we've implemented in 12 countries as different as Mozambique, Tanzania, Vietnam, Brazil, Mexico, Honduras, Paraguay, Colombia, Peru. So what I'm saying is, I don't, there is not necessarily a standard one size fits all. That this is not what I'm advocating for, but there are clearly some patterns and some tendencies that we can see in several places, and this really opens the door for us to stop thinking that if I only work in Latin America, or I only work in poor countries, or I only work in X or Y country. Fundaciòn Capital, for some reason it was named in Colombia. I'm in Mexico actually, but we are a global NGO, and we are aiming, or we're looking for scalable solutions. We're looking for those patterns that we can identify in different countries, in different places with similar conditions. So we're not thinking like comparing Mexico to Colombia, but we can compare certain cities with other cities where people live under similar conditions, and then we can think for solutions for their challenges in terms of financial inclusion and productive inclusion that could be pertinent for both. And on this collaboration, that I think it's increasingly necessary, and even more so in this context, I recommend Catalyst 2030, where I think one of the most amazing social entrepreneurs and innovators in the world have come together to think about innovative approaches to get to the SDGs by 2030. And this is like, these kind of events I think are really helpful for that, for us to identify where is it at, where else in the world people are thinking in the same direction, and how some of what we're thinking can add up to what people everywhere else are thinking, mainly in implementation, which is my argument, that digital solutions are increasingly common. A lot of people can do them. There's a lot of attention and focus, a lot of talent, but implementation of how to really bring this to people in a cost-efficient way, that's a very, very big challenge.
Okay. Thanks, Nelly. Anna, yes.
Thanks for the question. Maybe also following up on the question that was just raised in the chat about the data availability, but also then the quality. And I'm very happy that I think I saw Sylvia in the call actually, or in the event. So and she can tell much better how this all works. But overall, in Switzerland, for example, the Swiss government decided to offer for free on a voluntary basis to assess the climate risks for financial players. So this helped not only to kind of take away this argument that there is no data or you don't really know how much your impact is. It is also for free, and then collaboration with other countries allows to compare the different financial industries in Switzerland compared to other countries once the tests can be completed there too. And I think this could be something also on this question, like if you have, if you're able to offer solutions to measure the data exactly the same way for all actors, that helps to make it comparable and to have a high quality.
Yes, cross country, yeah. Good. I think Dr. Rabid would like to.
Yes, specifically on bilateral, I would say there's a lot to learn from each other, South-South cooperation especially. Our flagship program, income support program, that is actually based on the foundation of Brazil's Bolsa Familia program, and we learned that 15 years ago when Brazil was actually implementing it. And now for this fintech cooperation, China and especially Alibaba is providing a lot of technical backstopping and technical support for actually making it happen in Pakistan. So the role of Chinese technology for countries like Pakistan, I think those are proving quite helpful. And then, of course, one is continuously learning from various other countries, especially on the issues of data privacy and cybersecurity. So it's not only access to data, it's also then all the data that would be collected, whether it would remain just for the purposes it's collected, confidential and private, or it would become public. And we are learning a lot from various other countries about issues of data privacy and data security.
Thank you. Carlos?
Yes, I think there are two ways. The first one is what I've been seeing from Brazil. Brazil is actually, entering into agreements. We have one with Hong Kong, which is of 2018. The whole idea is to exchange technical assistance on innovation. So in order to develop new fintechs in Brazil. And the second one is it's related to the development of the tackles that you have in some regulatory movements, for instance, in open banking. As we see that the Brazilian law is pretty much based on European law regarding data privacy. So all of the issues that were barriers to the development of that regulatory movement can be, to a certain extent, copied and brought onto Brazil. So we don't have to spend that much time discussing because the solutions are already developed. So we do have some cooperation already in place, but we can have more in order to, advance some regulatory movements which already happen overseas.
Okay, nice, in fact. Okay, thank you. I think we could move to the audience's questions, and we have one request from one of our attendees. If one of you could share your thoughts about applications of decentralized finance, such as a blockchain to achieve SDGs. So would you have some counter experience to share? One of you would like to address this question?
At Planning Commission of Pakistan, with the technical support from UNDP, we have got a dashboard on SDGs, knowing the fact that in Pakistan, there are certain, almost all of the SDGs, those are the mandate of provincial governments rather than the federal government. So this compilation of data, timely data, and then marking the progress of different provincial governments, and also identifying where they require federal government support. It was important to have a dashboard or a portal, and the first steps toward that are already done. My institute, SGPI, we actually prepared that dashboard for Planning Commission, and now it's the populating the data that is being done. One of the things that is also being raised here by the panelists is about the quality of data that is gathered. Yes, initially the data that is coming, at times it's not verified, at times it's not of very reliable quality, but we feel that it is the initial step, just like the tax netting. First, one has to develop the habit of collation and compilation of data, and maybe a few months down the road or a year down the road, one can then be more stringent upon the quality of data and holding people responsible for not sending the desired quality of data. So that's how we are approaching in Pakistan towards it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Suleri. Any other contribution? Okay, I think one other question I would like to hear from you is the collaboration between regulators and the private sector. How do you see the dialogue between regulators and the governments and the private sector, for example, from the PIC's experience in Brazil, or how is it going and how do you see, but yeah, I'm happy to hear experiences from Brazil and other ecosystems as well.
Sure, Nadir, I think that the collaboration is working fine. We have public consultation process for everything that it's, put out as a regulation. So we have an opportunity to discuss, and usually what you see is that the directors from the Brazilian Central Bank, they often participate in seminars, and they actually have a lot of, dialogue with the private institutions in Brazil. So this is a good process. We don't have that in many areas in Brazil, but we do have that in the financial institution sector.
Oh, nice. Thanks. Any other experience from cross-sector collaborations or?
One of the areas where we are trying to enhance this collaboration, not between regulator and the data provider, but between the tax authorities and State Bank of Pakistan. And one feels that with the promotion of this fintech and with the promotion of digital financial transactions, our Federal Board of Revenue, they would be able to increase their tax base. So it's both opportunity as well as threat, knowing of the fact that people, they won't be able to hide their transactions. Of course, people, they're shying away from digital transactions, but at the same time, those who are making these transactions, they would be gradually brought into tax net if they are not already present there. So one has to adopt it with a pinch of salt and slight caution, so that it doesn't become too repellent for the broader promotion of fintech in the sector.
Nice, nice. Anna, please.
So I guess it's a bit a chicken egg problem sometimes. Where do you start? Do you, like, some financial players say, well, we first need to see the demand rising for it a lot before we can actually supply it. And the other way, the same you could maybe say with policy making. Do you first have an industry who is also supporting it a lot, or do you first need to have the regulation and kind of showing that some things can evolve that maybe the industry would not have seen before? And there, of course, this is always a very critical balance that you have to find. In general, I think a very transparent and open dialogue is super important, but then also to stay credible, kind of to make sure that if you have a target, and I think we do have the targets that we need to achieve with the SDGs and with the Paris Agreement, that we include all these targets, credibly in what we ask from the industries when we say first, well, we see where they want to go or what they can explore, and yeah, maybe to come back to the question before, because I think one could make a whole seminar about also the decentralized solutions. I mean, in general, it would be interesting to see what all could evolve, and thinking of like other systems and how you value things that help the environment, for example, or actions that help the environment could be very, very interesting. The question is a bit how we actually are able to set up and to align it with what we have so far, and also what people want. But I think it could be a very interesting topic to follow up.
Maybe for the next Think talk. Okay, so I think it's time to close our conversation, and as a closing question, I would like to ask to our speakers, what is the main message that you would like the audience to take away from today's conversation on sustainable digital finance? So could you give in a sentence what you'd like to the attendees of the session to take away? Who would like to start? Anna?
So I can start. So I think in general we don't have so much time left. So we have to go forward, and we have to dare to risk stuff as well. But yeah, as I said before, we have to be transparent about what is actually possible yet and what not, and we have to be sure to reassess all the time what we're doing and whether this actually still fits in the overall picture and the goals of the SDGs.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Would like to go next? Maybe Nelly, would you like to go next?
I would add to Anna's comment, and not much to add.
Okay, thank you.
Completely agree.
Okay, right. Dr. Abid Silleri.
Well, all I would like to say that for developing countries like Pakistan, one of the silver lining in COVID is rapid adaptation of digital technologies and digital transformation. And while this year of sorrows 2020, it left many sad marks in the history of mankind, the opportunities that it is offering is adapting digital transformation, working on it. We may be making initial mistakes while adapting it. As I said, that it's not the silver bullet to achieve SDGs, but if we adopt it now and disseminate, perhaps we can compensate for some of the losses, especially in terms of pace to achieve SDGs by 2030. So I'm quite optimistic about it.
Good to hear. Thank you. Carlos, would you like to add something?
Yes, I think that everything, because of the pandemic, is actually accelerating. So when you see the pace which everything is happening right now, as I mentioned before, I was expecting that the regulatory agenda would take longer than it actually did. It actually, the Brazilian Central Bank decided to make some things actually faster. And at the same time, this is a challenge. This is also an opportunity in order to be able to meet the goals until 2030. So, and I do believe that we have to, bundle together both private sector and public sector with the think tanks in between, in order to, to saw a little bit this discussions and to bring in the innovation, the technology innovations, the regulatory innovations, in order to be able to achieve those goals. We have an opportunity now, and I think this is a difficult statement to make because it's been horrible, but to a certain extent, this is the time frame for us to do something, and maybe it will advance, some agendas that will take even longer in developing countries.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Thank you. So I think that I thank you very much for the speakers, for your time and this insightful conversation. Thank you also to all attendees of this section. You will receive an email from us with the recording of the session, with the main takeaways, and also with the links where you can be updated about the next Think Tank Talks and the next Think Tank Hub events and Sustainable Fintech events as well. So thank you very much, and wish you a nice morning, afternoon, or evening ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao.